Wholeness, beautiful beings. Welcome to my channel. My name is Rashida Silvertree, and today's topic is about emotions. Feelings don't tell the truth. They ask us to pay attention. Feelings don't tell the truth. They ask us to pay attention. And yeah, let's get into it. So, a lot of the times, we seek validation when we do, human beings from a very early age were taught to regulate our emotions, and self-regulating your emotions is a very, very, very important part of developing into a balanced, normal human being, right? You don't want to have complete meltdowns and temper tantrums like a 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kid, right? As a grown adult. But at times, if there's something thrown off in your early childhood development, that kind of bleeds into your adulthood, right? And some people have a really hard time with self-regulating their emotions. They have outbursts, they are full of rage, and they lash out, and they will project, and they will sometimes their anger or rage or sadness will induce or raise the potentiality of self-harm or harm to other people. That's just part of, sadly, human nature. But we also learn to, with all the self-regulating of our emotions, we're also taught to mute our emotions. We're taught to oppress and suppress our emotions. We're taught to keep things and comments inside. Think before you speak, right? Don't just blurt out how you feel about something to someone's face, because you have to take in their feelings, their thoughts, their opinions into consideration. You don't want to offend. You always want to tiptoe and dance around other people's feelings or their thoughts, right? You're like almost, you're protecting yourself, to comply to someone else. And that can be a very virtuous, or maybe even labeled as kind thing to do. But we're human beings, and human beings, we are sentient, emotional creatures. And so a lot of us that are on the path of healing parts of, or fragmented parts of ourselves from the past, or whatever's happening in our present moment, or working on our anxiety on things that haven't happened yet, we as adults still have to self-regulate our emotions. And a lot of the time there's a misconception of your emotions, energy in motion. It's just stored up energy, right? Where something keeps happening, repeated behavior keeps happening to you, and it's making you feel a certain way. You've exhausted every path or tool of communicating how that's making you feel, and it's just not being validated, right? So then you have these outbursts, whether you get depressed, you get anxious, you get angry, you get sad, you get just downtrodden, and then you create this narrative, right? You're reacting to certain narratives. And so with that, what takes place with that is just a whole ball and wall of complex emotions, right? Because a lot of the time when we are triggered and feeling something's already happened, an unresolved issue has already happened, has already taken place in our lives, and it remains unresolved, and we just stuff it down, we suppress it, we oppress it. And then something happens in our present reality, and that wound is just, it's like the Band-Aid is ripped open, the scar is oozing, right? And we're just left with this big lump of feeling. And it's multi-layered, right? It's a feeling of sadness can be wrapped up in anger, wrapped up in self-doubt and shame or blame and guilt, or just apprehensive, fear. We're multi-complex, or very, very complex beings. And so when it comes to our emotions, we have to, I like the term ultimate observer, just observing how you're feeling and allowing the thing to flow through you. Now, a lot of what we get mixed up here is like people believe that their feelings, their emotions are the core truth. That is like their anger is the truth. It is the reason. It is the like I'm angry. And well, here's the thing: just because you're angry, or just because something's made you upset, or sad, or depressed, or anxious, it's not about it being the truth. It's about what's being shown underneath that, right? It's almost like our emotions they're like a compass to the real situation, to the real issue, to the real wound. And sometimes we get so carried away with our emotions. I remember working with my students a few years ago, and with the demographic that I was in, I worked with kids who would be labeled as American poverty, broken homes, parents are in jail, or, on drugs, or they're facing homelessness, they're facing unstable food resources, like just a whole plethora of real adult issues. And also abuse. And so these kids will come, walk in, and carry all of that in on their tiny little bodies, and their tiny, just their whole little selves coming into the classroom at 7:45 a.m. in the morning. And here I am trying to pass out paperwork, a little activity for them to start, and they have all of this complex stuff, and sometimes it would be so overwhelming for them that they would lash out. They would lash out at themselves. They would flip over tables. They would break things in front of me. They would even lash out to me and bite me and scratch at me, or they would fight their other peer. And when it comes to like studying the psychology and observing the psychology of children and their emotions, and how they would lash out, it was a compass telling me like their rage, their outburst, their excitement for what was happening was a compass in showing me and pushing me in a certain direction to look at. Like, don't get caught up in the emotion, the expression of emotion. Ask the right questions to peer behind that curtain and see what's really going on. Because most of the time, children cannot articulate into words these complexities that in adulthood we hopefully would have developed the tools to express ourselves in a much better way, or express our anger, express our sadness, express our doubt or our grief. But most of the time we don't. There are many adults who do not function well with expressing their anger, expressing their hurt, their pain, or their discomfort, or their anxiety, their depression. Even with people that face suicidal ideations, it's like we build an internal hell inside us. And whenever I've worked in psych health, so I worked with adult patients that would suffer from mental illness, and so they would be, when I would see them, they weren't at their best, they're usually at their worst, and they would usually be in the middle of a psychotic break. And so they're watching an adult literally revert back to like childhood in a way, and how they would deal with very complex emotions. Emotions should be a map. It should be like a compass directing you, pointing you in the right direction. And when other balanced, normal, or neutral adults are in a situation where you have a person or persons going through emotional outbursts from someone, this is where emotional intelligence kicks in, because you have to not get caught up with someone's anger, rage, sadness, okay? Or someone's just emotional outbursts, or even being like euphoric or excited, okay? Where it's too much. You have to look and like what are they trying to say? That an emotional outburst should say something's going on, not let's get this under control, I need you to stop doing this, and that's very difficult if you're in a classroom setting, or it's very difficult when you're in a facility and there are other patients who could get triggered by that. I will say it was an interesting experience. I had one set of twins that I taught in the same classroom. Yes. Actually, I taught two sets of twins in the same classroom, but that's a whole nother thing. But this one set of twins are male students, and they were right in the middle of a huge transition. They're 9, 10-year-old little bodies. We're in the middle of a huge transition. They were coming from a whole nother state, a southern state, all the way to Arizona. And then they had a lot of family issues going on, dealing with, divorce in the family and custody battles, going to court, just a lot of heavy stuff. So one day something triggered them and they both started wailing and crying. I mean, it was so disruptive to my classroom that I just had to stop everything. I pulled them out, and then there was another young student of the same age that took a liking to the twins, and he began to feed off of their emotional distress. So I had 3 students screaming out, I mean wailing, okay? So emotionally, these 3 students were literally feeding off of each other. Now, at that moment, as a young new teacher, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to get some control over this because this is getting absurd. I removed them from the classroom, we're outside, and they continued to wail to the point where a whole other classroom literally heard them screaming. I mean, it was a complete meltdown. Now, as time went on, I started to understand that the dynamics, the hidden issues behind all the strange outbursts, right? Because when you put people in a certain, people who are in the same vicinity of each other, and all of a sudden, you have like one person starts crying, and another person starts crying, or you have someone all of a sudden really excited, then someone else feeds off that energy. We're so sentient, we're bouncing to and fro off of each other, right? And we can get lost in that in the moment. We can get caught up in the moment, and then that moment takes us somewhere, and then everyone's bypassing what's really going on. And that is what I'm here to remind you. With our emotions, you carry an internal compass within you, right? So when you find yourself really angry or really sad or depressed or anxious, the mind can really F with you. It can take you down a whole rabbit hole. And people, there's a phrase called blind rage, where you see nothing but red. And on a very rare occasion, have I ever been in that type of space before. I mean, for example, one time I used to take Uber religiously to get around because I lived in a city of 5 million people. And I left my whole wallet, purse, everything in the Uber. Now, Uber had a strange policy that you couldn't claim your things if you left it in the vehicle. The driver had to reach out to you and get it back to you. I never received any of my things. My cell phone, all my cards, my bank info, everything. I was so angry. And I had an acquaintance with me standing next to me. I was so angry. I was shaking, and I literally, being the empath energy person that I am, I saw red, okay? He took it upon himself to not talk to me at that time. I was so livid. And it scared me. You know what I'm saying? Our emotions we can scare ourselves. When we reach a certain depth of human emotion, sometimes it freaks you out. You're just like, whoa, I didn't know I could go there. I didn't know I could get entrenched in sadness, that it would motivate me to do this or motivate me to do that. But I stress the need to look at your emotions as a compass and not just as the truth of the whole matter, because your experience is the piece of the truth, right? like what you're personally experiencing is your truth, but just it's not the whole picture. It can never be the whole picture, because with our shared experiences with each other, we're going to have different angles and different perceptions of what's going on. You know, what's bad, what's good, you know, the role that we play in it all, right? Because everyone could be wrong all at the same time. Everyone could be right all at the same time, and then there can be right and wrong. There's no black or white. We're not just black and white as human beings, as sentient beings. You know? And so I'm asking you, when you see someone, when you see your child, when you see a colleague, when you see a family member or a friend, or even when you bump into an acquaintance or a complete stranger on the street, you have to like really decipher what's going on. And sometimes you can't recorrect something. You just have to let that emotion out. Right? Like hate, for example. Hate is the frequency and the energy and the emotion of all lack of love. Right? And sometimes there are people who get so deeply embedded in that emotion that it spills and spews out of them because there's no more room inside the person. And that's what emotion is, energy in motion. It fills you up until you can't contain it anymore. And not just negative emotions or negative feelings, but also positive. Like you can embody joy, so much joy in your being that it spills out of you. It spills out of you, and it touches and it reaches its arms to other people. Or love, that emotion spills out of you, and it reaches and it touches other people. It soothes other people. That's how powerful emotion is. But don't get it twisted, right? I'm angry and that's my truth. No, what is your anger really saying? Right? For example, the political climate in the U.S. is getting a bit hot, if you will. Right? There are a lot of things going on that many people are not in agreement with anymore, or probably have never been in agreement with. But with all this anger and frustration, right? It's look at why. Ask yourself, why is this person feeling this way? Why? What's going on? You know, a lot of the time people just want to be heard, and not being told, hey, guess what, you're right. It's not about being wrong or being right. It's just about being heard. It's just about sharing an experience with the other. And that's what's so powerful with this digital age, with social media platforms. Human beings we're able to share how we're feeling when we are experiencing the human experience. There's millions of comments of people saying, I'm so happy I'm not the only one. I'm so happy you're sharing this. Hey, you're not alone. You know what I'm saying? That is what human beings need. Because it's the moments when we feel most isolated is when things go wrong. When you have someone so taken away and possessed, they become possessed by the emotion and the rage and the hatred or the lack of, or the feeling of loneliness, that they are pushed to harm themselves and to harm other people. And that's what we need to understand. And guess what? That emotion that they're possessed by it's not the whole truth. They believe that emotion is so true that they become possessed by it, and then that emotion influences them to create an act or to commit an act that really, really causes much harm and much suffering. So use your emotions as a compass. Okay, I feel upset. Why do I feel upset? Okay, this is the reason why I feel upset. Well, why is this reason? Like, well, what's going on? And you need to investigate. Use your emotions as a compass to investigate your experience. Because usually it's just a reaction. It's emotional reaction is just a reaction to another reaction to another reaction to another reaction. We're all feeding off of each other. We don't even know it. We really don't. We bounce off of each other all the time. So that's it. That's all I really wanted to share with you all. And may this message find you well and whole. Thank you so much for tuning in.